山形國際影展其實係一個乜嘢嘅影展嚟嘅咧？佢係1989年創立嘅電影節咯，2年一次。咁其實32年，其實今年咧就係亦都應該有嘅。咁但係其實可惜今年就因為疫情嘅關係啦，日本咁佢哋就取消晒所有真正實體嘅放映，改咗做一個網上嘅放映。咁其實好可惜嘅，因為其實呢個電影節咧，其中一樣好重要嘅嘢咧，佢就可以令導演同埋觀眾咧可以近距離咁接觸。咁另外咧，其實佢哋亦都會有好多唔同類型嘅活動啦，令到當地山形呢個可唔可以叫小城市咧？一個細啲中小型嘅城市裏邊嘅市民咧，其實都可以感受到電影文化嘅魔力，亦都可以睇到唔同類型嘅電影啦，同其他國家嘅導演創作者去交流。咁其實咧呢個電影節頭先都講過啦，32年歷史，係一個好特別嘅影展嚟嘅，即係同可能其他影展唔同，甚至同我哋嘅影展都唔同啦。其實佢除咗係一啲坐定定睇電影之外咧，其實佢成個城市咧都好擁抱呢一個影展呢一種文化。始終係一個小嘅城市啦，咁所以其實佢有呢種咁大型嘅活動嘅話咧，係全民參與。咁大家都好高興，即係男女老少咧都會睇一啲唔同類型嘅紀錄片，一啲甚至係佢哋未必真係認識嘅國度，未必認識嘅一啲事件，未必認識嘅一啲文化，其實佢哋都會去睇。咁其實我哋今日咧就會好高興，就一陣會請到呢個影展裏邊嘅策展人啦，去同大家做一個分享，講下其實呢個影展嘅重要性係點樣，同埋呢個影展其實過去啦、現在啦同未來其實係會點樣咁樣。咁當然其實如果大家有啲咩問題咧，亦都歡迎大家發問。咁其實我哋係咯，我哋今日好多同事喺度，可能冇咁多咪嚇。咁但係其實就如果你哋有問題嘅話咧，其實我哋就會俾個咪你，咁你可以發問。咁但係當然啦，咁可能先我哋會介紹今日嘅嘉賓出嚟，然後先至可能我哋有個討論，然後跟住大家可以諗下有啲咩問題。咁但係喺呢一個請今日嘅嘉賓出嚟之前咧，我哋就會播一個少少嘅短片。其實呢個亦都係今日嘅嘉賓send 俾我哋，因為佢覺得呢一個短片咧，其實可以令到大家 get 到其實山形國際紀錄片影展 YIDFF 其實嗰個精神點樣，個精髓係點樣。咁我哋一係可以睇一睇呢一個短片啦，然後跟住我哋就請今日嘅嘉賓出嚟同大家傾下偈。
歴史と文化と食いしん坊の町、山形市。この町で世界的に有名な映画の祭典が開かれているのを皆様ご存知ですか？ご存知ない。それはいけません。オリンピックは4年に一度、2年に一度は映画祭。世界中からたくさんの映画と人が山形市に集う。それが山形国際ドキュメンタリー映画祭です。1989年から始まった山形国際ドキュメンタリー映画祭。2003年の映画祭では98の国と地域から1454本がエントリー。177本の作品が上映され、約2万人の動員を記録しました。ここでしか見られない作品も数多く上映され、全国各地から多くの人がやってきます。しかし、映画祭の楽しみ方は映画を見るだけにとどまりません。映画が終わったその後は、監督さんへの質問タイム。酒の勢いを借りて監督さんに猛アタック。映画論から文化、経済、ペットの話に至るまで、 激論を交わして空いたお腹は山形の味覚が癒してくれます。芋煮に餅にそば打ちに監督さんも舌鼓。アジアの国々からは摩訶不思議なお菓子たち。一見不気味なお菓子の山もお口の中で大事件。これもまさしくドキュメンタリー。お話と食べ物でお腹はいっぱい。そろそろ映画が始まる頃、ゆっくり映画に浸りましょう。夢かうつつかドキュメンタリー。心地よい眠りから覚めたらラジオ体操で心と体のリフレッシュ。お客さんも監督さんも12342223。勢い余ってレッツボーリング。今宵はみんなでピュア発想。スター気取りで一等賞。元気の源山形国際ドキュメンタリー映画祭。皆様のご参加を心よりお待ち申し上げております。
Okay, so this is probably a very vivid and energetic introduction to this very important film festival, the Yamagata International Documentary Film Festival. So as I mentioned, today we have a guest with us straight from Japan to talk about the festival. Shall we give a round of applause to Ms. Asako Fujioka, a member of the board of directors of the festival and also a programmer of the festival. Thank you so much, Asako, for joining us. Thank you so much.
Hi, Clarence, and hello, everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me.
I think the audience are very well prepared for the discussion with the very interesting clip that you sent me the other day, and we really feel that we are at the festival. I think it would be very difficult for us to actually follow through with that. Maybe next year, the AFF, we will have to get people to do exercises and all that. In the cinema.
Well, it's my favorite promotional video of the film festival. But as you probably noticed, if you understand Japanese, they're saying in the voiceover, it was like in the year 2003, and then the subtitles it says in the year 2013. And actually, we're showing this in the year 2021, which tells you that a lot of institutions in Japan, for better or for worse, they stay the same for a long time. And that's, I think, the spirit of Yamagata Film Festival. I can't but smile and laugh when I see that video every time. It's a flawed, promotional video. I don't think you should follow our example, because you probably noticed that there is only one scene in that video that shows people watching movies. And in that scene, people fall asleep. So as a promotion for a film festival, that's kind of, proud of our programming. Maybe it's not the right message to bring across, but I hope you felt the energy of the festival, and also the fact that it's a fun place to be. And it's really out of the box. We try to do things to bring people together. You may know that Japan can be a very formal country, and a lot of events, especially around the time we started, the festivals, that's 30 years ago, very, very formal. Everything is very, straight people in suits, and people in like advertising agencies controlling the scene, and every event has to be run by the clock, minute by minute, and very little leeway for spontaneity or, real discoveries or encounters that are not, not pre-planned. And so I, the reason why I fell in love with the festival was because of this very special space where the unpredictable can happen, and not as formulaic and organized, predictably organized as in the rest of Japanese society.
But it must be very hard for you and your team, since the emphasis of the festival is on spontaneity, is also about the interaction with audiences. But this year, you weren't able to do that because of the pandemic, and then you had to change things at the last minute in order to abide by the rules imposed by the authorities. So how did the latest edition go this year with your online version of the festival?
Yes, yeah, and thank you for asking. It's about 2 weeks ago that we closed, so it's very fresh in our minds. It was a very hard struggle to lead up to that decision to go online. The pandemic, as you know, is so unpredictable, and we didn't know, what would be happening, 3 or 4 months or half a year later. But eventually, the idea was that it's different from holding a festival in a big city like Tokyo, because people gathering from around the country would be coming to this small town, and where after the people leave, the organizers of the festival in Yamagata will have to face any kind of consequences that might, if there's a cluster or some kind of somebody falls ill, because I mean, it may not be because of the festival, but all fingers will be pointed at the festival. This is the environment of a countryside, I think, rural, urban community. But I think in the end, we were happy that it went, online. We had to shut down, or we had to small our program to about a third or less than a third of what we usually do. So we showed about 50 films. And we could not show what we are quite famous for, our retrospectives, our focus on history, cinema history. The older films would not be, feasible on the streaming, platform. So and everything was online, but we wanted to keep the spirit of being there alive. So instead of doing this, VOD system where you can watch films, from wherever, whenever you like. Every screening was programmed, like in your physical space at a certain day and a time. And if you miss it if you miss it, you just can't see it again. Or if you start watching too late, you will not be able to watch the film to the end. So we were very, very strict. I think I've never seen another festival as strict as us in terms of those screening times. And we also held live, Q&A sessions immediately after the screenings, open to the public and for free. So being live also added to this excitement of, wanting to see the films at a certain time, share the movie screen basically with people who you can't see, but that are present around the country. And then going into the Q&As and talking to the director, being able to ask live questions. I like here, very, very much. I mean, online can also be kind of intimate. So I was really surprised to see that there were, tears, and filmmakers were crying, or even our moderators started to choke up when they came upon a very emotional Q&A exchange. And so that had actually never happened before in a cinema situation. So I think the Zoom setup, or this online intimacy, I discovered something new. I had something, against. I was, I guess, quite biased against doing things online, but I was very pleasantly surprised by those encounters and happenings during the festival.
But what was the reaction among the general population about this arrangement? Because the Yamakata International Documentary Film Festival, it has always been renowned for actually engaging people from all walks of life, and then getting them to come to the cinema to watch documentaries that they might not be familiar with, people who are not exactly cinephiles. But with the online situation, with Zoom and all, perhaps some of the people who might have been going to the cinemas, they might not be coming to the Zoom sessions, or they might not be that well versed with the online situation. So how did you make this up with this part of your audience in Yamakata.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the the negative sides of what happened this year. I find that although we were able to reach people who had never been to the festival before because they live too far away, or they are unable to travel because of physical or family reasons, for different kinds of reasons, they were able to pick up some films, and finally, they would say, I finally got to be part of the festival. But a lot of our local audience, some of especially the older generation people who are used to buying a ticket and going into the cinema, I felt that they were not part of our festival this year. So it's true that we lost them. But at least we are trying to compensate for that by the festival has a tradition since 1989 to purchase copies of, when we were in the film era, we would purchase copies of the film with the Japanese subtitles and keep it in our archive for rentals for the rest of until the film is actually bought up for distribution, for example, or so we're in charge of like non-theatrical distribution of many of the films when the film owners agree with us, and so that's continued to this day. And so this year too, many of the films, although some of the films have been already picked up for distribution in Japan, many of the films, some of the award winners even will be, we will be assigned or will be delegated the right to show these films or rent them out to universities and nonprofit festivals around the country from now on. So there's still, when the pandemic, goes down and people are starting to go back to the cinemas or starting to organize, screenings in their communities, the films in our archive are available for them to rent out and to, view among, in their own cities and towns.
I think this mission of promoting these films among the general populace, it has been like that since the very beginning in 1989, wasn't it? Asako, can you tell us a little bit about the origins of the festival? Because I think the festival was founded as an official initiative and not exactly an ongoing program, but it was supposed to be a one-off thing about the centenary of Yamagata, wasn't it?
Right. Clarence, I'm always impressed by your research. The festival probably better than many of our team members. But it's true that
maybe I should move to Japan then, I think.
Why not? No, we won't take you away from your wonderful, festival and cinema. The Hong Kong people will, hate us for that. But yeah, so the festival started in 1989, as you said, and it was really a bureaucratic, kind of a government initiative to, do some kind of international event. And one of their ideas was to organize a ski jump event, to organize some kind of a food fair event. And among the many ideas that came out, the festival caught on because I think the people, the city leaders at the time had really foresight, and they said that they don't want to do something that's just one-off for the 100th year anniversary, but they want to do something that will continue and to contribute over years. And so they chose the festival, particularly because there was quite a renowned documentary filmmaker living in this prefecture right next to Yamagata City. His name is Ogawa Shinsuke, and he was known for is the leader of a collective, a filmmakers collective that was around for about 20 years. And eventually through the work of his collective, he became one of the most famous documentary filmmakers of our, I think, 70s and 80s generation in Japan. He started his career in the political struggles, the protest against land reclamation in the Narita airport area, where the government was trying to forcibly take, farmland away from farmers to build the bigger international airport that today as being the Narita airport. After so he made a series of films there with his collective about the farmers' struggle, and definitely on the side of the peasants fighting against authority. And as the times of, the times change, we call it in Japan, we call it the season of politics. So the 60s and 70s was really full of political struggle and student movements. But as Japan, the economy started to grow in an intensive way and people's lifestyles started to change and the political scene started to wane, Ogawa took his team, his crew to Yamagata and decided to investigate the farming. I think that, Ogawa's films have been shown so often in Hong Kong that many of your audience probably know his films, and I just you don't need this introduction. But anyway, Ogawa made a series of films also in Yamagata about farmers' lives. He and his crew started farming their own, land and investigating how the crop grows or the lives of the people in harmony with, their environment, so to speak. So I think that you could say that he was following the flow of Japan, of investigating now what is actually a community now that the Japanese society overall is, changing so rapidly from the post-war period to a new, more industrialized and maybe perhaps more urbanized society. He was trying to look for something, the new step, his theme. His themes was trying to change. And so going back to the festival, so he was a charismatic, leader as a cultural. I never met him myself personally, but I hear that he was a great speaker and a very charismatic man. And he was able to persuade a lot of people that that a film festival was a really good idea, because when his films were shown in Berlin Film Festival and Hawaii Film Festival and overseas, and he won prizes there, he came back and told everybody what a wonderful thing it is to have a film festival, to celebrate cinema, and to organize a festival is going to be a big contribution also to the community, the local, the people. And so I think he planted that seed into the minds of the local people that the cultural, the internationalism of a documentary film festival, especially this idea of a documentary film festival, was so new at the time. It was very radical, but he said that on the one hand, we have Tokyo International Film Festival, which is just about to start around that time. And instead of doing this, red carpet glamorous thing, we can really look into something that's new and unique. Documentary was starting to be recognized in, like, for example, in Amsterdam or other festivals around the world as introducing the changes of world views, basically, like through form, different kinds of forms and different kinds. I mean, documentary was no longer this boring, educational vehicle that it had always been considered to be. And just around 1989, 90s, I think, was the beginning of that discovery in the cinema world. Yeah. So, I'm really glad. I mean, or else, if that hadn't, been around at that time, if that idea did not, if the beginnings were different, I think our festival would not have continued for so long.
From the very beginning, Ogawa Shinsuke already decided to, as you said, bring an internationalist touch to the festival by actually inviting all these filmmakers from around the world to converge on this small Japanese town, and then to have these interactions with local audiences, sometimes just after a screening, just in the lobby of a cinema, just have a very casual talk or that kind of thing. So that's what he wanted to do from the very beginning, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Because he was a great communicator and he loved, being in touch with people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I also want to point out that he had the ideas of Asia cinema emerging from that time, and again he had foresight. I think on one hand it had to do with his own collective kind of falling apart, and people were not able to the young people of his community, of his filmmaking, collective, were starting to drop out, and he was discovering that the younger Japanese people who were going much more towards materialism or making a career or doing something, for their own, families, and for the individual. And he looked over to Asia, and the Asian countries and Asian filmmakers were working with a larger viewpoint about with their commitment to society. And I guess there were maybe a younger bunch of people that he came across, the Asian filmmakers that he met. So he chose to focus. He at the first festival, he started the symposium talking about the importance of Asian documentary and how it should how it must be supported, in order for it to spread its wings in the world in the next decade or more.
So from the get-go, what he wanted to do wasn't just a festival of merely screenings. So the event itself is already also a platform to do something more, to promote documentaries, to promote cinema, or even promote certain social causes. It was there from the very beginning. And how has it continued throughout the years? I mean, during these past 32 years, how has his mission been continued or transformed up into the very present?
Well, I'm not sure that, I'm not as convinced as you are that he was such a political, he had such a, sympathy, or, his motivation was really, for the festival was to support political causes. I think he was actually much more interested in the diversity of cinema and, forms of cinema, and investigating, for example, in his own filmmaking, he brought in fiction and like dancing and all kinds of unprecedented, forms of experimenting with very long forms, and even with the use of 16mm film. He was much of a very, very curious about the form of cinema. So I think from his background in Narita, when he was much more invested in politics, I think he gradually changed after he came to Yamagata, and that was really definitely a plus for the festival, because we have in our programming, even to this day, this idea of trying to present the widest range of what we would call documentary. The documentary definition always has to be evolving, and the idea of our programming is try to show whatever is new at the time, and something not necessarily only about the content or about subject matter. Although, of course, as you pointed out, a lot of documentary, a really good documentary, has to do with investigation and commitment to a cause, or some kind of oftentimes associated with a movement. But that's not always the case. If you look at our lineup this year, our grand prize winner was from Hong Kong. Of course, that Inside the Red Brick Wall, by Hong Kong documentary filmmakers, and it was a huge splash for our online audiences. It was spread of mouth like wildfire, really. It was not only critically acclaimed by the jury, but the number of people who watched the film in our festival was very, very big. The last screening for the award-winning films was sold out, 500 films, 500 seats. Yeah, and on the other hand, we have very intimate and private and personal films that are about a victim of a sexual violation. For example, a woman standing up to herself and talking about memory and about very, very difficult, intimate topics. So I think in both senses, in terms of form and also in terms of subject matter, I think we've continued, since Ogawa, to keep the balance of the two, or at least we try to.
So actually, Asako, can you tell us when you joined the festival? What was the occasion? What was the experience of you. I mean, why did you actually decide to join the team at this festival?
Yes, it was 1993. This is the third edition of the festival, and I was lost in life. And I had had a bad experience in my work with a hierarchy issue in Japan. You know, there's a strict hierarchy of I guess you would say this pyramid of command. And I was quite hurt in this experience, and I was not sure what to do with the rest of my life, and kind of isolated. So but I was out of money, so I picked up a tip that this new festival that was just emerging was a really good one, and they might need somebody who spoke English. So I asked if I could be of help, and I started by being kind of a gopher, do you say? Like, carrying bento boxes and telling people where the toilet is, and like helping out, in the cinema, basically. And when I encountered, so when I was there and met the filmmakers and the audience and the organizers, they were all, I mean, this is a documentary film festival, so there's no hierarchy of sorts. There's no red carpet where you have no stars where you have to keep on a pedestal. And that environment, and also the relaxed atmosphere where people can be without formality, very friendly to each other, I guess you can say, and open up to talk about cinema in a very egalitarian way. That was what I really fell in love with, and it kind of saved me from the troubles that I had, in my professional personal life. So my way of contributing to the and giving thanks back to the festival that saved me at that time as a young woman was to spend 30 years of the rest of my life with the festival, which I've been doing. Yeah.
But you've been involved in the various aspects of the festival, for example, programming films, but also developing workshops, and also in a way nurturing audiences, and also nurturing young filmmakers. So how has this changed, I mean, for you and also for the festival in all these aspects?
Yeah, well, I think that programming is a really great learning experience for anybody who is working in cinema. And of course, Clarence and your team also has great programming skills and I think knowledge and whatnot. But for me, I think that watching a lot of films a day is really for young people. And for me, my interest, just went on to doing other things, which is at the moment, it's about organizing the residency in Yamagata. So the festival is a place where people, come together to in a festive atmosphere, in heightened spirit. Filmmakers come here and they discover an audience. They are encouraged to go back to continue their filmmaking. Audiences go back to their daily lives after the festival, also emboldened and, after the discoveries and meetings with people in films. And then life goes on. But I thought that Yamagata is also, as the beautiful nature and the the great food and the lovely people, have a lot more to offer the rest of the year, around the calendar. There's a lot of film screenings going on, thanks to the festival organization. And I thought that recent, filmmakers are very busy, much too busy chasing pitching forums and deadlines, and also like making a living, of course, in television and stuff like that. But independent filmmakers really need a place to and a space and to kind of hibernate or to really focus on the work that they're doing. So I will be opening up a call for entries of the next Yamagata Documentary Dojo, which is coming up in February 2022. So it'll be 30 days in the mountains of Yamagata in a hot spring spa. And so that's my idea of trying to support the growth of Asian filmmakers. but of course, on the other hand, there's, as you say, creating events, growing audiences, also a very important part. I guess, as I mentioned, renting films out, to the public also allows not just the audience to learn from the films, but also initiates or supports organizers of communities, all across the Northeast part of Japan too. I think, organizing screenings is really a fun thing to do, and it also brings the community together, and it becomes a forum for people to talk about, all sorts of things of life. So yeah, I think cinema is a great way to bring people together and to solidify or to overcome differences, or this yeah, in general, bringing people together.
Yeah, as I mentioned just now in the introduction, before the clip and also before our talk, I did tell the audience that the objective of our program here at the AFF was to select the Japanese films by young filmmakers who have appeared at the festival, because we want to actually emphasize the important role the festival has played in nurturing these young filmmakers. For example, this film that we just saw, Storytellers, it was by a very young Hamaguchi. So of course now people know his fiction films, but back then, he was also making all these documentaries as well. So what was you talked about the dojo. So, but even before the dojo, the festival has played a vital role in propelling young Japanese documentary makers to international attention. So what was that like? Throughout the history of the festival.
Well, I don't think that our festival can claim that Hamaguchi's success has anything to do with us. But it's true that in our lineups in the past 30 years, we have had a lot of prominent filmmakers who were starting their career and went on to become very big. And many of them were, for example, Kawase Naomi, or not just Japanese, but filmmakers like Wang Bing, or say Apichapo Yuroseta-kun, or Riti Pan, and these filmmakers were selected for our lineup with their short films, or with their early documentaries, and then when they went on to the bigger films, or fiction films, or moved on. But I find that it's very interesting that many of their roots were in documentary. I think that well, it's always interesting, like Hamaguchi's films. I don't know if have you seen Driving My Car, and then if you watch this film and then you see Driving My Car, and then you see the references of how he shoots, why he decided to shoot in a car, or how there's an interesting interview on our website from that year, 2013, when he was making this trilogy of films from Tohoku area, about how he places his camera and why he wants to set up a scene in a certain kind of a way, and how he envisions his fiction to be stemming from this kind of documentary filmmaking. Yeah. So I think Yamakata's always been a place for experimentation and for thinking, and that allows filmmakers to go on to, some festivals are like places of consumption, like people would go there to consume films, or to check out what's the newest fashion thing, but Yamakata is a place of more of a contemplation, maybe, and discussion and experimentation among filmmakers also. They meet people, like I know that Kawase Naomi met her future producer in Yamagata, or like a protagonist sometimes. A lot of we are not a very industry-based festival. Actually, we are not an industry-based festival at all. We don't have an industry component to our festival. But in this kind of non-commercialized environment, where people can be returned to be their I mean, at heart, everybody's a film buff, like a cinephile or somebody who loves something that's new or discovering. And by creating a place where people can feel that comfortable and like that, and not have to, show off or, I don't know, sell their wares, it allows the filmmakers and the audience to come together to be inspired, creatively. Maybe that's the reason why, a lot of filmmakers have come out from our, festival in that way. And actually audiences have gone on to make films, like fans of our festival have gone on to become, to be like Lim Kawai. I would say that he's a fiction filmmaker, quite interesting, Malaysian-born, a filmmaker who's making films pan-Asian, but he has started also, working in the festival also as a big film fan and coming here to the festival. I can give you many examples like that.
Indeed, I'm sure there were, just like here in the audience, probably there are aspiring filmmakers watching films. And then, of course, they are here maybe also to ask you questions about, the festival, and also about Yamagata, and also about, cinema or documentaries in general. So maybe we can actually open it up to the floor to see whether there are any questions from the audience. So if you do want to ask Asako a question, please raise your hand, and then my colleagues will pass you the microphone. So if you have any questions from the audience? So far, this gentleman over here. Oh, thank you.
Well, maybe I ask the first question. And first of all, thank you for your prize presentation to the Inside the Right Big World. This is, I think it's very great that Japan has the screening, but most of Hong Kongers hasn't seen this film yet. So then second one, I wanted to ask about something, the Japanese documentary situation now. We actually in Hong Kong, we haven't seen much of the documentary of Japan before. And maybe we've watched the Olympic in 1964, the very famous one, or Okawa-san about the narrator, or director Hara about the Minamata's place. Then, but others, we watched some of the documentary in NHK or some only on TV, but in cinema is less. So can you give us more idea about the documentary now in Japan, or by different director, or what's the topics of the Japanese director in documentary they are looking on? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a difficult question. I think there's a surge of new interesting documentary coming out from Japan. Whereas until a while ago, I think there was a little bit of a blank after the charismatic work of Hara and Ogawa and so forth of that generation. Perhaps sadly it has to do with the society. The Japanese society has its share of social problems, and the more social problems there are, the more interesting documentaries are coming out, because there's a need for these issues to be told. And while I think Clarence has chosen some very interesting films from our lineup, within the limited number of films that you could have chosen, you chose films that have to do with the world. And I think this is one of the strengths that's starting to help Japanese documentary, which is the international audience-ship. For example, you see in this program, Dear Pyongyang. So Yang Yong-hee is the director of this film. She made the film, I think, about 20 years ago. and she went on. This year, her new film is called Soup and Ideology, and it was shown in the Yamagata program, but also won, I think, the best prize in the DMZ documentary film festival just recently. And one of the strengths of this film is kind of representative of what I think is the strength of Japanese documentary, which is the personal, going global, the personal stories and personal storytelling, which I think the Japanese are, quite good at. On the side of the NHK, the broadcasting is another totally different field and totally different world. But I think, there are filmmakers who are like Yang Yong-hee, who have a very global mind and who are able to make films that are understandable, personal films that are local, but also international. Yeah. So, for example, Nude at Heart is the other film that I could recommend that Clarence is showing here in this festival. This is also an international co-production with France. Yeah. So I think that Japan is like really full of cultural and social topics and stories. I think many of you come to Japan because you're interested in Japanese society and Japanese people or lifestyles. Until recently, the filmmakers had not been very good at presenting these stories to the world. I think the films have always been quite local. The stories have been small and based on an understanding, a shared understanding that the Japanese society, has. Also, the films could be released in the Japanese cinemas and within Japan and make enough money. So there's no financial issue that the Japanese documentary filmmakers have to go internationally to make their work financially feasible. Yeah.
I think And sorry, Asako, just to respond to what you just said, I mean, in terms of Japanese filmmakers actually going abroad, because actually this roots from our selection in a way, because we also selected several films which has something to do with what you said, issues which are beyond the local. For example, Aragane is about miners in Bosnia, and also Back of Kurdistan is about these refugees who were expelled from Japan, and then the filmmaker actually followed his new friends all the way to Kurdistan, to Turkey. So young filmmakers, they now do have a more internationalist or international scope, don't they? I mean, in terms of looking for stories.
Yeah, well, not as much as I think Hong Kong filmmakers, Japanese people in general are very much more, inner domestic, minded, and they're looking only to the Japanese audiences. But I find that I would say it's hard to say better, but the more interesting or like the ambitious films, I guess, are those that can like speak to a larger international audience and not be based so much on, a shared knowledge of a specific, very small, local, I don't know, thing.
Okay, so maybe we'll see whether there are any.
Yeah.
There's another question from the audience. Would anyone want to, sorry. Yeah, okay, if you do want to ask the question in Cantonese, it's perfectly fine. I'll try my best to translate into English, and then so that we can sort of have an exchange with Asako. 有冇任何問題咧？其實可以用廣東話問嘅，因為我都可以翻譯做英文，咁然後可以最緊要係各位 the gentleman。
Hello, Asako.
Hello.
I would like to ask some questions about the interactions between the festival and the filmmakers in Japan, and also probably about the trend or how to say the phenomenon in Japanese filmmaking. I would like to ask do you think Yamakata has more interactions with the Japanese filmmakers compared to the past? And also, do you think the Japanese documentary filmmakers are trying, how to say, to experiment the forms of filmmaking, like the hybridity, because now the technologically advanced era, probably more filmmakers may try different ways, no matter it's about the equipment or it is about the ideas like intermingling fiction and reality, something like that. Do you think that the majority or are there certain enough filmmakers in Japan are trying to make such probably quite innovative or documentaries, or do you think that there's still something probably problematic or some questions to be overcome, some difficulties in the Japanese society, and is the situation be changed by the environments like a pandemic or some tragedies or recent situations in Japan? Thank you. Probably the questions may be very complicated, but I don't know how to organize it very well. Sorry and thank you.
Right. Well, I think there is a lot of variety of filmmakers, Japanese filmmakers coming out right now. On the one hand, you have someone like Oda Kaori, who is the filmmaker who made Aragane in your program here, who is really doing experimentation in not about, I mean, it's not about, it's about the art form. She's an artist. Yeah, and then there's also those who are, you know, coming out with very political or social issue documentaries. I think two of the most interesting documentaries in the past year are about politicians in politics. One is about I forgot what you call it, corruption, you know, in the local, you know, government, and it's kind of investigative journalism, but done very with a humoristic, you know, taste. And the other one is quite a straight documentary, a personal character-driven, you know, documentary, but shot over a very long period of time of one politician who's, you know, up and coming. Yeah, so I think I don't know how much. Well, some of the filmmakers on are, as I said earlier, influenced by, you know, our festival or being at festivals or meeting people at festivals, but it seems that really there's no end to. I mean, it's the same in the rest of the world, but there's always new people coming out and trying to do new things and you know, interesting things that they find for themselves. I'm not answering your question very well.
No. I think our friend here is alluding to the fact that, well, most people are probably, when they think of Japanese documentary makers, they think of Ogawa Shinsuke, they think of Harakazu, maybe Yang Yong-hee even. I mean, they are more politically driven. I mean, or political issues, social issues. But there are people like, there are filmmakers like Oda Kaori who are making more experimental, well, not explicitly social documentaries. Because I remember watching this documentary at the Yamagata Festival called In the Cockpit. Asako, do you remember that? In the Cockpit is basically set within a very small apartment, 3 young men making music. Basically, it's them fiddling with their electronic equipment and then turning out a sort of a hip hop track. So it's just that, but it's very gripping viewing. It's not exactly very political, but it's also an experimentation of form. So this is also something you and your team look for, don't you? I mean, when you look at the documentaries, it's not just about the issues, it's also about the aesthetics as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and I guess one of the roles, I mean, the question was really about the film festival a little bit. So the role of the film festival is really to, you know, highlight and to shed a light on the range of films that is possible, so that I think audiences or upcoming filmmakers are quite can be inspired by their example. So for example, with Oda Kaori coming up, she's really a very strong, kind of a charismatic star of the art world right now in Japan. She won the Oshima Nagisa Prize last year from PF Film Festival, and because of her presence and because of her, I don't know, of her work, there is a league of younger, artists coming out and following her. So that's one way that this wide range of, kind of filmmakers would come out. I think in the time of, Ogawa, I think a lot of filmmakers would aspire to make films like him. And then, so today in this world of diversity, I mean, as curators and as kind of, we could be called, gatekeepers. Some people might call us gatekeepers, but the film festival has a responsibility in what kind of diversity and variety of forms and subject matters of filmmaking there are, in order for the rest of the world to realize that they exist and to discover how great they are.
Okay, that's good. I think, we are about running out of time. So I just want to ask, because of the challenges for this edition, but you also said that, out of all these challenges, you in your team actually discovered new approaches or new possibilities. So what holds for the Yamakata International Documentary Film Festival in the future? What plans do you now have? Of course, you're still actually taking a break from all that because just 2 weeks ago.
No, actually, the festival is still ongoing. You know that we still have scheduled screenings for this coming Sunday, and then the following Sunday. Actually, they're Japanese films, and they are open for worldwide viewing. So all of you in Hong Kong can also check out our website and sign up for. It's I think registration only, so you have to sign up in advance. But you get to see 5 Japanese documentaries. I think 4 of them with English subtitles, but it's all of them are open and available to watch. I think scheduled time. You have to go there at a certain day and a certain time, but even from Hong Kong, you can watch Japanese documentaries this weekend and next weekend, which is really great. But for the future of the film festival, I don't really know. As an organization, we have successfully transferred. I mean, our beginnings were with the city government inside a government organization, and we became in a nonprofit, privatized, organization about 12 years ago. I think our goal is to keep ourselves, going, maintain ourselves as a nonprofit organization. In the best way to do that is to focus not just on the festival, but to be diversifying, our activities for, expanding film culture and nurturing film culture throughout the calendar. So we are starting to do programs with children, or we have been doing programs with children, but we want to go into schools. Of course, with the dojo and the residency, I think we found a way to nurture filmmakers. We are also allowing young people, high school students, to help them organize their own screening routines, to help them choose the films that they want to show and organize with their friends, movie screenings for the communities. Yeah, in many different ways, I think we have still leeway to mature and to grow. And I think it all goes hand in hand with a film. Film has a life cycle. It's made. I mean, it's financed and made, and there's a creative process, and then it comes out into the world, and it reaches an audience, and the audience pays money for the filmmaker to make the next film. So this kind of eco cycle, that eco system that we have created for the cinema, and in the course of a life of a film, the film can touch upon so many people's I mean, lives in financially also. I think we, the cinema has to make money, and as staff, we have to also earn a money living. So financially also, but also in terms of, I mean, we're not working to create just something that like this or like things. We are in the creative industry that the film can do so much more than be a commercial item. So this ecosystem has a lot of potential for touching people in different walks of life and across society, and also hopefully across the world. It's a very interesting vehicle to be part of this as a film festival.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on the progress of all your plans, Asako, and your team, because actually, just as you mentioned, the films, they're still available to be seen, the Yamakata selection, and also for further understanding of the festival, the website itself is such a treasure trove in terms of information, archive information, and also the publications of the festival. They are also on sale, right? I mean, through the website. So actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Asako, the website is www.YIDFF.jp, is it?
That's right.
So actually, yeah, this is a font of information that I'm sure the audience would want to know more. And of course, well, it's actually from there that we, some of the films that we are screening at the AFF this year, well, some of the knowledge, well, some of the films we got to know from all that. So thank you very much, Asako. Thank you for of course, doing the festival, and also thank you for joining us this evening to share with us your experiences working
it's a
at
pleasure
the festival.
I wish I could see you better, but you are too far away.
The audience, maybe we can wave. And then okay, thank you so much, Asako. Shall we extend another round of applause to Asako Fujioka from Yamakata YIDFF?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asako. Well, take care. And then,
2023 is our next festival. 2023 October. Let's hope that you can travel.
Yes, definitely. Well, count us in. Count us in 2 years' time. Okay, thank you so much. Well, see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.